Hey, good afternoon, everyone. This is Professor York here. I am doing a quick recap on our presentation that we did on Monday to address a few concepts around the business model canvas as well as financial concepts. Since we found in some of the BMCs that there were some points of confusion. So we're going to talk about channels. We're going to talk about the difference between what we call distribution channels, which is in the BMC, and also what we call media channels, which are part of Get, Keep, and Grow, which are part of customer relationships. And then we talk about metrics, because at the end of the day, you need to have metrics to be able to determine how effective your processes are in terms of sales and marketing, as well as operational efficiency. But for this purpose, we'd probably be dealing with just funnel metrics as we relate to Get, Keep, and Grow. So here we go. Today's topics: channel plus customer relations, funnel, tactics, and metrics. So let's get into to channels. So channels, what are they? Most people defer to thinking about channels in terms of media channels, TV, radio, Facebook, social media. That's where a lot of confusion comes in, because that is a term that is used. But for the business model canvas, we're thinking about, if you see the truck delivering product to the customer, this is what we're talking about in this course, which is distribution channels. So how do we get the product ultimately to the customer? And it can be a few different ways. You need to think about who is in that chain, maybe individuals, maybe firms that are involved in that process of making products are available for use and consumption by your consumers or industrial users. And so what we're looking at is this flow from the producer to intermediaries to buyer, particularly if it's a physical product. And then there are digital channels, which we'll get into a little further in terms of they can be intermediaries as well. And as I mentioned beforehand, the communication channels or media channels can be confusing. And so remember the truck delivering the product to the customer. Okay, so two types of channels. Okay, you can have physical for physical products. Okay, wholesalers and retailers, particularly like if we look at alcohol, pharmaceuticals, or food that go direct to the consumer. But then you can have digital channels, particularly Amazon has played a major role as a digital channel intermediary, and also the App Store. And then there is a Google Store. But also you can have your individual website if you own a business, and that can be a channel for delivering. We see that routinely with software and software products. Okay, two types of channels that we have to think about as well, in addition to physical and digital, is direct or indirect. So if you have more of a niche market or small audience and customer work and really small volume type of things, a direct channel would be there. Tesla is a very good example. Some of the wineries are a very good example in terms of direct to consumer. And indirect is where you're going mass market, and that's where you're trying to really scale and reach across the country, maybe in international as well. And so therefore you will need to have intermediaries. So Walmart, Amazon are examples. But if you were going to ship wine, if you're a winery to China, you probably are going to have a distributor or a partner over that's going to have to function as your channel to get your wine to the Chinese marketplace. So if we look at the B2C, okay, a few different, you have is a direct channel here on the left-hand side, as you can see. So you have Schwan Food, you can go direct to consumer. Okay, many products are distributed this way, as we talked about, like wine is one of them. But and very much a lot of niche products that we see in small scale custom type of products. But there are many large scale volume products are through intermediaries. Okay, and like for instance, General Motors works through retailers, as we know as various dealerships. Mars will go through a wholesale and retailer to distribute their products ultimately to consumer. okay, such as their candy bars and their dog food products. And then Mansar products may need to have an agent. They're specialty products that require a specialty type of agent. We actually do see this also in the distribution of fruits and vegetables that will have specialty agents that are there. Financial products are another one as well, where you may have to have an agent who has a license as well. So that just sort of gives you some example of indirect channels. If we look at B2B, what we find is on the top here, various producers, but again, you could have IBM going direct to an industrial user. That's in classic B2B. My business works directly with large businesses, so I don't work through channels. I could work through an ad agency that works with a big pharmaceutical company. I've done that when I started the business, where I would have an indirect channel. So I might have an agent, but like a producer like Caterpillar might work through an industrial distributor of, we'll call it construction products that ultimately move into an industrial user. That distributor might be a reseller we might use as an example. And then, for instance, Steak Fastener Company may have an agent that comes into play. And then, as you can see, you could have the mix, which is the longest marketing channel in a B2B, where you may have an agent, an industrial distributor, as well as an industrial user. And then we get into electronic digital marketing channels. And it is the internet. And classic examples are in terms of the really during the value chain or the distribution chain from a book publisher going to a wholesaler to Amazon and to the consumer. This is actually changing very rapidly now, is that individual writers are able to self-publish and then distribute on Amazon. So in addition to having this publisher to wholesaler to Amazon, we are getting to the point where it could go from actually the author to Amazon to the consumer. Autobytel, which we know is the largest distributor of actually used and new, they are literally a virtual broker. Okay, and they work with dealerships. So the manufacturers have the distribute the cars to the dealership, but Autobytel can be that virtual broker because of the internet to be able to get with the consumer. And a lot of consumers do buy their cars vis-a-vis the internet. My example is I just bought a few years ago my last car vis-a-vis an Autobytel in terms of searching out various models, and then ultimately that deal was brokered by Autobytel back to the auto dealer to purchase, and I got a pretty good deal on it. But it allowed me to span, and that's not just looking at my local dealers in San Luis Obispo County, but a few hundred miles away and as far as actually Arizona to see what I could find in terms of make and model and price. And then we get into like airlines, where you might work through Orbitz. I commonly buy airline tickets through this channel and get my tickets there because it's an efficient way to be able to shop actually multiple airlines at one time. Orbitz is called what we call an aggregator. And then last but not least is Dell Computer. I think some of you might have. And Dell actually functions both in terms of direct, and that's how it started out actually, as you made your orders online and then they custom built your computer to your order there. As we know, Dell has moved into doing physical distribution, so they work through wholesaler and actually retailer. Best Buy is one good example, and I do believe I've seen Dell computers even at Staples. So as you can see, you could be both physical as well as digital. But the beautiful thing about digital is it really you can perform things at a lower cost than a traditional channel, which makes it very attractive. And it combines both electronic and traditional media to create time, place, form, possession of value for the consumer. And, you know, I love the best example of doing that is really what we're seeing, like, you know, we can go, you know, Amazon, Spotify, you could even look at what Tesla is doing these days relative to the internet. Now, the pros and cons of channels. The pros are they do perform an accounting function, especially in businesses that do require accounting for tax purposes or regulatory purposes. Okay, so alcohol, tobacco, and firearms and believe it or not, pharmaceuticals. But there's also warehousing and inventory management. There's logistics management. There's marketing and sales support, which really helps in terms of moving that product through the channel, especially when you're trying to create velocity. And then handling returns when the customers are not happy with the product, works through the channel so you're not getting overwhelmed with returns coming back direct to you. They work it through the third party channel, retailer back to the wholesaler, and then back to you. Allows for, I think the biggest advantage is this broad reach to build a national brand, which really, when you think about it, sometimes you say, I'm going to give up some things, but I'm build this national brand. And that brand equity really creates even greater value to both the balance sheet as well as to the company valuing. And it is necessary when you want to move into the early majority, and as you scale, you need to be thinking about distribution channel. On the con side is you're going to pay for it. Then you're going to pay a lot, anywhere from 40 to 60%, according to Steve Blank. Channels and retailers have incentives, so you have to play this game, especially in the food game and the alcohol game, in terms of product placement. And so you have to have incentives for end caps, shelf space, and feature deals. Give you a case example. If you go to the Albertsons in Paso Robles, they pulled out the microbrew cooler that they had, and the Silver Bullet folks from Miller Coors, actually created a great display. That did not just happen on its own. Someone paid for that. I think that was Miller Coors, so that they would have ideal location by the check stands that you could be able to pull beer. I'm still a little disappointed I can't get my cold microbrews because of that. But that's how you work in that business, in the retail food business, because the margins are thin. So you're basically renting space in the food business, and also in the retail business, such as like Walmart, we will talk about in a second. And it requires a significant commitment of advertising dollars. So channel's going to be looking at and seeing what is your advertising commitment, because the goal is to create pull from the consumer, so the consumer to come in, or also to have in terms of incentives that such as coupons that you might find, so that the consumers come into the retailer, and so we can move product rapidly. Because what we are talking about is trying to create turns of the inventory, and this is what we call velocity. And it's not exclusive to your product. You may be handling your competitor's product. And last but not least is the classic is with Walmart, where you don't get credit actually for the purchase of that product until the customer actually buys the product when it's scanned. So I find that that's really fascinating as well. So hopefully you get a sense that is in the BMC. On the value side, it is above the point where we talk about the revenue model, and it is below where we talk about customer relations. So channels or distribution channels, customer relations deal with more of the media channels, which we'll get into next, which is customer relations, the funnel, tactics, and metrics. So we've talked about this, and basically what we're trying to do is connect the value proposition to customers. So a concept you'll hear about is the funnel. And the funnel is about getting the customers, keeping the customers once they've become a customer because they've purchased and been entered in a purchase relationship, and then growing by tagging on other features and options. So getting you is AIDA. And I remember in class I talked about Alec Baldwin and Glengarry Glen Ross. Awareness, interest, C here is consideration, but a decision is D and an A. And this reflects the customer journey as they are getting to know your product, your company. They are doing research relative to available other options, including your own, ultimately to test, maybe with a sample or a test drive, which would be consideration. And then last but not least is to acquire. And part of that we use is earned and paid media, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Keeping is where you have these customers, you want to keep them loyal. So we have Team One that's working in this space, and we have loyalty clubs. You have a little, punch card. If you do 9 sandwiches, you get the 10th one free. There's newsletters. There are user groups. There are club get-togethers. There are exclusive offers for loyal users. The airline miles and the hotel miles or points are a part of way of keeping customers that are there. And then growing those customers are where we upsell a customer, such as you buy a computer. The folks at Best Buy say, hey, would you like to have a service agreement? Or by the way, how about a nice case with this? Cross-selling is, hello, you have this wonderful dinner that you have in the restaurant, and we would like to be able to sell you a bottle of wine. And then last but not least is referrals to get other people that you can recommend to be able to get into a relationship with this product and company. So tactics fit with customer relations, and this is something I want you guys to think more. So I'm taking these actually from some of my marketing classes so that you can have. So there's inbound and then there's outbound. Inbound is the magnet. This is social media. It's your website. Your outbound is TV and radio. There's earned, such as blogging, okay, doing, like, for instance, an interview. And then there's paid, which is what you would see in terms of TV commercial or radio commercial or an advertisement such as a billboard. So earned is free, okay? PR, news stories, interviews, tweeting, such as Donald Trump does, and then blogging. Blogging is probably one of the best ways you can do on your website to be able to improve your search engine optimization and to build a following and to build a community. Traditional media, as we talked about, TV, print, radio, billboards, direct mail, and flyers, okay, to help create awareness. But then, excuse me, then there's product placement. And we don't realize it, but manufacturers actually pay for their products to be placed in TV and in movies. And as you can see, a few examples here with Coke sponsorship, and in this other commercial here, or this other TV show, we see that there are multiple products in place. In fact, it's one way of being able to finance a TV or movie production. And then there's trade shows, as we talked about, where you go and you can, with other manufacturers in your space, be at a major event. The American Society of blank, the American Society in Healthcare. We have American Society of Health Systems Pharma, American Society of Hematology, American Society of Clinical Oncology, American Optometry, American Ophthalmology Association. There's the National Education Association. There are just a number of different associations get together, and they have these large, gigantic trade show floors that literally you could spend 2 or 3 days on. And it's a great place to be able to interact with customers. And I know many sales and marketing people will spend literally a few days and get a number of great leads out of there. In fact, in the ophthalmology space, which I've been in, the American Academy of Ophthalmology has actually been one of the key places where ophthalmologists go to buy their equipment for their offices. The most important you'll find is the sales force and materials that is there, because that's critical in terms of two pieces. Salesforce in terms of closing the business and being able to support that customer journey with information and resources, but also to keep the customer happy, and to keep the sales force working on message and utilizing really things that we want to focus in from a marketing standpoint in the brand. We will have marketing materials to make sure that we are delivering the correct brand message and the brand personality, and support systems to support not only the initial acquisition, but continued loyalty. And then there's digital. As we've talked about in terms of social media and your website, There's search engine and banner ads. There's SEO, which is search engine optimization. AdWords, which Google makes a lot of money off it. And then there's automated marketing, like with HubSpot. And then there's email, such as with MailChimp, in terms of sending out mass email and doing it in such a way that it isn't spam. And there's blogs. And then there's social media. And I know you all are involved with social media, but social media is a valuable way of being able to create attention as well as to support the customer journey in terms of interest. And as we know, we have, the big three really are Facebook and we call it Twitter, okay? And you could think that Pinterest or Instagram are part of the big three, but, these are something, or the big three actually are Facebook, Twitter, and actually LinkedIn. And then Pinterest is up and coming because you can create pin boards of interest that ultimately you can hyperlink into your website. And then Instagram, which is really, really cool. It's something that millennials have really embraced. And then a lot of folks have embraced in terms of sharing video content, such as like lectures like this in terms of YouTube. And then I know in China they have WeChat, which is very, very popular. So one of the things is really to understand that social media, one, is a valuable support. Two is that it's not going to go away, and that how you interact in social media can help really drive customers to your website by being able to have appropriate hyperlinks from your Facebook to your website, even from your Twitter and even your Pinterest and Instagram accounts. So this will give you sort of a sense of that social media can play a role in your get and keep parts of the funnel. Then last but not least, there's a thing called metrics. That's right, we do activities, and what gets measured actually gets managed, okay? And that was Peter Drucker. And what gets managed, believe it or not, you can know whether you are being effective or not. And that's on both sides of the canvas. But when we want to think about key activities in management in terms of sales and marketing, you've got to have metrics to know whether you're effective. But also in terms of your manufacturing side, you need to have metrics to know whether you are efficient, and because you have to manage the cost side. So we talked about this concept called the customer journey a little bit in class, and it really parallels the funnel. But many times, we all do go through this process in buying a product, or even as simple as going out and make a decision to where to have lunch. And usually, like for instance, I'll use a lunch example, you might be over at the farmer's market and you see some really, really delicious strawberries, and you go, wow, and you smell some of the foods that are there that are being cooked up. And so you recognize, it's coming to like mid-morning, late morning, a little hungry. And then, like everyone now, we have our phone and we go and say, hey, where's some local places that I might be able to get lunch around here, do some information search, and I learn about some different options. I'm trying to now choose between, do I want sandwiches, do I want Mexican tortillas, or do I want a salad, or do I want to go and have pizza? And based on what I'm getting back feedback from, say, Yelp or Search Advisor, TripAdvisor, then what happens is that you then can evaluate alternatives, and then you make a decision. Oh, okay, great. We're going to choose the pizza place right down the street. It has great reviews. I've got a number of options. The wait is not going to be long. And then you go forward and you buy that. But the post-purchase behavior is very critical because it's the keep side. And once someone has had a good experience, you want to make sure that there are things such as, like in the food business or a sandwich business, you might have the coupon, or you might have, like for instance, the punch card, or you might have the loyalty, piece here on your keychain. And that helps to reinforce that relationship. And what also is important is on your journey is, if you've had a good experience, you probably will be back on Yelp and or on TripAdvisor recommending if you had a good experience or not recommending if you did not. And so these pieces tie together into this funnel that we talk about, and we can be able to layer down our different tactical options, okay, tied to the different points in the funnel that we're talking about in terms of acquisition, consideration, which basically your interest or decision making, and then last but not least is your closing, and then even in terms of retention. Okay, so we're back to then some key metrics. So the first key metric that we talked about in brief 4 was CTAC, which is the cost to activate a customer. What is all those dollars that you spend in terms of earned and paid media to move customers in the funnel? And say you spend $5,000 of marketing money, and that drove 100 customers into the funnel, being aware, and ultimately you ended up with 10 customers who purchase your product. So then it's that $5,000 versus 10, so your cost of activation of a customer that is converted is $500. Then there's the other thing that we look at relative to the funnel, which is called efficiency, which is the rate of conversion, which is if we have 100 that convert to 10, that's a 10 to 1 ratio. What we want to look at in this journey is, can we make it more efficient? So instead of 100 in 10, can we get 20 out? And so we look at ways that we can improve the C piece, or the consideration of interest and decision making, to help with conversion over to purchase. Case example could be more coupons for discounts, might be more sampling, might be certain information pieces that were missing in the social media, good recommendations on Yelp from loyal customers. All these things help with that conversion. And so when you're doing metrics, you're looking at what is helping you convert through. And with like Google Analytics, you can tag your web page, and you can actually tag where you're getting customers coming from various sources, and you can look and find where actually the funnel's getting plugged. And so then you can address that plug so that you can improve the efficiency or the flow. And ultimately, if you're doing that right, what happens is you improve the efficiency. Your cost to activate a customer will go down, which is what we look for in business and what investors look for as well. And then you get into what we call the lifetime value of a customer, because as we know from brief 4, that the customer that you keep is the cheapest customer you have. And so realistically, say if you are in a subscription model, and say your customer is spending $100 a month on a subscription, then 12 months is $1,200. 4 years, say 3 to 4 years, which is typical in terms of keeping a customer, you could have a customer that is worth $3,600 to $4,800. So say $4,200 total is that value of that customer, and you can then do an analysis of that based on your marketing costs to acquire, but also a marketing in terms of customers that ultimately you keep over a lifetime, and versus that fully are kept over that lifetime, to give you actually a better feel for what your effectiveness of your marketing spend would be. Okay. One of the other concepts that we don't have here, but is very important, is also what we call churn rate. And what that means is maybe they have experienced your product, but they did not have a good experience, so they bounce out. So of those 10 customers that were acquired your product, maybe 5 end up staying. So then your churn rate actually is 50%. And so you really try to shoot for minimizing the amount of churn. This is classic that we see in health clubs, where you could have 40 to 50% attrition on an annual basis. So what you're looking to do is, how do you keep these customers? Because that it will help with the lifetime value of the customer, number one, and that you don't have to throw more money back into getting customers as well. So churn rate is another metric that investors will want to know and look at how you are addressing to keep those customers, because now you start building up that what we call residual customer return. You don't have to work hard outside of keeping them happy and keeping new products that are coming in front of them because they trust you and that you're going to deliver value, versus having to go out and get that new sale, which is always much tougher than keeping the established customer. So then in digital, you have digital metrics. And so this is something that you should become familiar with. In our MVP testing, we will be just looking at, click-throughs or some sort of response. I've had students do as much sophisticated testing such as heat maps, but you look at the first one with just impressions, which we tend to see in terms of general print and broad-based TV advertising, like the Nielsen ratings is one that is. Or if I'm with a print piece, I may say my reach is 16,000 in terms of our mailing list. Okay, so that we get 16,000 impressions that are on that journal, and our reach might be then how broad that distribution list is. But what really counts is those are sort of soft and have been used in TV and print. But where rubber hits the road, especially digital, now we can see actions, and that's where engagement. So clicks, likes, and comments. And then we get into other metrics such as cost per 1,000 impressions, cost per acquisition or sign up that we talked about beforehand, the cost to acquire, the sentiment, which is the like or not like we see with Facebook, but you could see vote up, down in Quora as another example. And then you do have others such as unique visitors, such as, is it that you have an individual who's returning, or how many new unique individuals are coming through? So say you have 100 visitors, and of them 75 just are returning. So realistically, the number of unique people that you have, are going to be, you have your original group there, but the unique visitors for that week really are going to be your 25. Then you have click-throughs, okay? And that is where you have an actual call to action red button on your web page, or a sign up or download, or some sort of call to action response. And that's what you're looking at. And that's where Google will charge on their AdWords the click rate, which is again the rate of clicks and on your content impressions times 100, and 20% baseline is pretty good. And then you have this click-through rate, which is the clicks to brand versus the clicks to content times 100, and 10% is desirable. And last is link tagging, which is links with analytics tracking built into the URL. And Bitly is a very good example that's there. And now with Google, in their analytics dashboard, they actually have that can help you tag even more. So you can tie back even to source sites in your social media. So this gives you a lot to think about relative to ways of being able to measure your marketing actions that are there. And these are just some food for thought, but I think for your MVP at the end of the day is if you're going to have something that's digital, is a call to action or a sign up or movement to the survey to get it completed. Maybe if you have a video, if time on video, and I know some folks have been pretty sophisticated in working with heat maps. That is another neat metric. But the key is when you are testing an MVP, that realistically what you want to do is find out if you have some traction. And that is really the objective there, to see whether you have what we call product market fit. So anyway, I hope that this was helpful as a review, and I wish you luck with your preparing for your MVP1 presentation that's coming up next week.